King Charles has opened up like never before. In what he calls his most personal project to date, the British monarch has given unprecedented access to cameras and interviewers for a landmark documentary titled, Charles, My Life, My Truth. Set to air in late March 2026 on BBC One and select international platforms, the film promises to reveal sides of the king the public has rarely seen. Charles, who turns 78 in November 2026, personally approved every frame and every word spoken. He wanted the documentary to feel honest, intimate, and free from the usual royal polish or distance. In one of the most striking sequences, the king sits alone in the gardens of Birkhall, his beloved Scottish retreat, speaking quietly about solitude. I have always needed quiet places to think, to listen to the wind and to feel connected to something bigger. He describes how painting watercolors has been his private escape since childhood, a habit he still cherishes. The camera lingers on his hands, mixing colors and brushing delicate strokes across paper landscapes. Painting lets me breathe, it slows time, and reminds me that not everything must be rushed. Another deeply personal moment shows Charles reading bedtime stories to his grandchildren George, Charlotte and Louis. He uses funny voices, makes silly faces, and laughs freely in a way seldom captured on film. Viewers see a grandfather, not a sovereign, a man who delights in simple family joy. Charles reflects candidly on his early years, marked by emotional distance from both parents. He recalls boarding school as a lonely place, where he felt small and often overlooked, despite carrying the weight of future kingship. The documentary does not shy away from pain. Charles speaks openly about witnessing his parents' marriage unravel, and how that shaped his determination to build a different family life. I saw what happens when love fades, and I promised myself I would protect what matters most. He speaks with quiet gratitude about Camilla, calling her his anchor, my truest companion and my safe harbor. Their love story, which began decades ago, is treated with tenderness rather than defensiveness. Charles admits the public scrutiny was often cruel, yet he says Camilla's strength carried him through. The film includes rare home video footage of young William and Harry running through Highgrove Gardens. Charles watches the clips with visible emotion and says, "Those were the happiest ordinary days of my life." He also addresses the estrangement from Prince Harry with a tone of sorrow rather than anger or blame. "There is not a day I do not think of him, of Meghan and of Archie and Lilibet. I pray for the day when bridges can be rebuilt, because family is the foundation of everything." Charles does not dwell long on conflict, choosing instead to focus on hope, healing and reconciliation. The documentary highlights his lifelong passion for nature, showing him planting trees, walking forest trails, and speaking with scientists about climate solutions. He repeats his belief that environmental collapse is the greatest challenge facing humanity today. We have very little time left to act. And the window is closing faster than most realize. Charles explains how walking alone in the woods helps him process the immense responsibility he carries. Nature does not judge, it simply is. And in its presence I find clarity and calm. The king also shares lighter moments, such as cooking simple meals in the Burkall kitchen, and laughing at his own lack of culinary skill. He jokes about burning toast, and admits Camilla is the real chef in their household. These glimpses humanize a man often seen only in formal uniforms and ceremonial settings. The project was filmed over nearly 2 years, with Charles reviewing footage and suggesting changes. He insisted the tone remain warm, reflective, and free from sensationalism or hidden agendas. Directors worked closely with him to ensure authenticity rather than polished propaganda. The soundtrack, composed by a young British talent, blends classical strings with subtle modern tones. Aerial shots of British countryside alternate with close-ups of Charles's thoughtful face. The contrast between royal grandeur and quiet personal moments creates powerful emotional impact. Friends and family members appear briefly, offering short tributes to the man behind the crown. Camilla speaks warmly of his private humor, his endless curiosity and his deep capacity for kindness. Prince William praises his father's unwavering support and his ability to listen without ever judging. Even staff members from Clarence House and Highgrove describe a boss who remembers names, asks about families, and shows genuine concern for their well-being. Charles reflects on kingship as both privilege and burden. The crown is heavy not because of gold, but because of the duty it represents every single day. He says he never sought the throne, but accepted it as the path life laid before him. The documentary avoids controversial topics, such as royal finances or detailed family disputes. Charles chose to focus on love, legacy, and the values he hopes to pass forward. He speaks movingly about his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, and the lessons she taught him about service and resilience. Her example remains my guide, even now that she is no longer here. The film also shows Charles meeting ordinary people, listening to their stories in hospitals, schools, and shelters. One sequence captures him sitting with homeless individuals, sharing tea and hearing about their journeys without interruption. Every life carries value, every story deserves to be heard, he says quietly after one long conversation. Environmental sequences highlight his hands-on work, planting native trees, restoring peatlands, and protecting rivers. Charles explains that he plants with future generations in mind. When I plant a tree, I know I may never sit in its shade, but someone else will, and that is enough. The documentary ends on a note of quiet optimism. Charles looks directly into the camera and speaks about hope, faith, and the power of small actions. Change begins with one step, one choice, one kind word. And I believe we can still turn the tide together. Critics who have seen early cuts call the film A landmark moment in royal communication. They say Charles has achieved something rare. A portrait that feels both regal and deeply human. The project allows viewers to see the man who has waited nearly 8 decades to speak freely. For many, it redefines how they view the king, shifting perception from distant figure to relatable grandfather. As the premiere approaches, anticipation continues to build. The documentary arrives at a time when the monarchy seeks to balance tradition with modern relevance. Charles's willingness to reveal vulnerability may prove one of his most enduring contributions. By sharing his joys, regrets, passions, and quiet hopes, he invites the public to see him not just as sovereign, but as a man who has lived a long, complex life. Charles, My Life, My Truth, is more than television. It is a personal letter written across decades, finally delivered to the world he has served so faithfully. In every frame, in every carefully chosen word, the king reveals the heart behind the crown, and the human being who has carried it all these years.